with all of that context there, we begin with the Atlanta Hawks. Their notable moves include they acquired Dejounte Murray and Jock Landale for Neil Gallinari, Charlotte's 23 first, which is top 16 protected. Then it's lotto protected in 24 and 25. They also gave San Antonio their 2025 first round pick unprotected. Atlanta also gave a first round swap to San Antonio in 26 unprotected, a 2027 first round pick outright unprotected. And that was it. I was about to go through the Rudy Gobert trade package and include a 2029 pick there. The Hawks drafted AJ Griffin at number 16. They traded Kevin Huerter to the Kings for Mo Harkless, Justin Holiday, and a 2024 first round pick that's protected until Kingdom Come, or it's lotto protected in 2024, top 12 in 2025, and then top 10 in 26. Then it turns into 1 second after that. They also created a $3.7 million traded player exception. They signed Aaron Holiday and Frank Kaminsky to 1-year vet minimum deals. They traded the number 44 pick, Ryan Hollins, to the Warriors for Tyrese Martin, the number 51 pick, and $2 million in cash. They then signed Tyrese Martin to a 2-year, $2.7 million deal, partially guaranteed, and they signed Trent Forrest to a 2-way contract. Their notable exits, they waived Sharif Cooper. Delon Wright signed with the Wizards. Kevin Knox signed with the Spurs. Kevin Knox signed with the Pistons, Gorgie Jang signed with the Spurs, and Lou Williams remains unsigned. That is not even the longest transaction list we need to get through in this podcast. But Grant, what is your grade for the Atlanta Hawks?
So just as you were going through it, I decided to lower it a little bit because so I'm down, and I might be higher than you still. I don't know. I'm down to a B-, which I can imagine is too high for a lot of just see the pick outlay that went back to San Antonio for Dejounte Murray, who is someone that, when we talked about San Antonio before, is probably going to need a max deal in a couple years. So you gave up all that pick equity. Those unprotected ones especially are, those are hard to get. And you have the likelihood of having to pay this guy like a real superstar, which I don't personally think he's quite on that level. He's really good. I like what he does. And the fit, I guess I should talk about that now. The fit makes sense, right? You need a guy that's going to guard the best backcourt offensive player because Trae Young can't do that. We can go deeper into or not how much point guard defense matters versus we know it's not as important as having a good big man on the back line or some switchable wings, but it's still an issue. It was a glaring issue. So Murray's a great defensive player. He's a great, primary playmaker. So as a secondary playmaker, I like him a lot. I have some questions about what you do with him when he's off the ball. I think what probably happens is you stagger him and Young a lot. They both had, I think they were in the top 5 in, seconds per touch and touch time generally. So there's like some stuff to work out. But at the end of the game, they're going to play together. And so I'm not sure what Murray's value is offensively if he doesn't have the ball, and certainly Young should have the ball. So all that said, I think Atlanta's better. And just talking about the big things, I don't mind the Huerter move. I like getting Kings picks just full stop, even if there's a bunch of protections on it. And like the only guy that the Hawks lost that I think might actually, they might feel the loss of is Delon Wright. I think he fits everywhere. I think he's just a good, 7th, 8th guy. But other than that, I think, they added a star level player, a guy who was an all-star last season and who kind of fills some of their needs. So I dropped it to a B- just because of what they gave up and what they'll be committed to going forward financially. But B- is still an above average grade. So I guess I'm a little something more than lukewarm on the whole deal.
So I am higher than you. I went with a B.
Surprise.
And I basically agree with everything you said. I'm just more pro risk for teams in this sense where players are not changing in free agency, at least right now. Maybe that changes because of the cap spike and players, they're not going to, like Dejounte Murray, for example, is not going to extend off this number because 120% raise off that final year isn't going to be close to his max. But would he have just left for Atlanta outright in free agency, even if they created the cap space? And if we want mid-market and smaller markets or non-glamour markets, depending, because Atlanta's a real market. I don't mean to call them a small market, but if we want these non-glamour franchises to actually compete for titles or to take swings or to feel like they have a chance, these are the moves you need to make. And, Dejounte Murray, all of a sudden going from the best player on the Spurs to the second best player on the Hawks, like that's a big difference. I am worried about the offensive fit more than anything. You laid out everything. The other thing is Nate McMillan has said that they're going to get Trae Young moving off the ball and put the rock in Dejounte Murray's hands. That's fun to think about in theory. But like Trae Young hasn't done that through his first, half decade in the league, basically, in part because the Hawks weren't built to do that. But one, is Dejounte Murray a good enough playmaker to warrant doing that? And then the bigger question is just, what does Trae Young look like off the ball? He can't set screens like Steph Curry. That's just not going to happen. Can you envision him coming off screens and flinging up these daggers? For sure. Is that something he's going to be comfortable doing? Because that's what will separate him from Steph Curry versus Luka or James Harden, where like they sort of need to be ball dominant, I would say, even though James Harden did a good job accommodating a Russell Westbrook and even a Chris Paul. So I appreciate the swing. I think he fills what was their biggest need when you really look at the roster. What I was uncomfortable with, and I considered like a C plus B minus for a second, they've kind of just decided that they're going to punt on a bunch of shooting. They go from Kevin Huerter to Mo Harkless and Justin Holiday, both of whom are inferior shooters to him. You have John Collins still, but you're at a point where if you have Clint Capella and Dejounte Murray on the court at the same time, that's two. I would categorize them as two non-shooters, even with Murray's mid-range game. And we don't really know what he looks like as a higher volume set 3-point guy. That does concern me, but I like the idea that they took this risk, and I don't care about the Charlotte pick. I think when you're looking at these picks now, all beginning after the Hawks picks, after this current Dejounte Murray deal, that's something fair to quibble over, because that's like you've given the Spurs control of 3 of your picks, but that swap, you do have to sort of wonder, well, how much value will that actually have? Because you presumably are going to keep Dejounte Murray, and are you going to be worse than the Spurs who are entering the early stages of a rebuild? So it's really like, I kind of think it's the 2027 first to really just quibble about. And I didn't think that was worth really lampooning them for. I also like, finally, that they didn't just move John Collins for the sake of moving John Collins. And maybe that changes once Kevin Durant and Donovan Mitchell are moved. But the way the market was shifting for him and some of the packages and rumors that were out there, if even an iota of them were true or accurate, like the value for John Collins wasn't there. And I frankly don't understand it. I think he's one of the most underrated players in the league right now. And he's also a really good outlet if you want to go with him at the 5, maybe because you can build stronger defensive lineups now, or just having another floor spacer on the court when Clint Capella and Dejounte Murray are there too. So I wasn't in love with their offseason, but I think I appreciated it, is the best way to phrase it. And I do think there's an outcome where, would I categorize them as an Eastern Conference finalist? No, but could you look at this team and say, if everything breaks right, they're a top 4 team in the East? Absolutely.
Yeah. And then in that case, all those picks are in the 20s, theoretically, or, mid to high 20s, even if it really goes right for them. And then it's probably worth it. I mean, you got to talk about opportunity costs. Maybe those picks could have been used for something else, but I don't know if you would have been able to find something that, like you said, Murray just fills the holes. Like, for how long did we talk about how, well, when Trae Young's off the floor, the offense falls apart because there's just nobody making plays. And Bogdanović addressed that to some extent, but I feel so much more comfortable now that whatever happens, Atlanta's just going to have a guy on the floor that can run the offense. And so, and with Murray, it's someone that, at least as a point of attack defender and kind of a passing lane ball hawk, like, he's going to make a difference. So yeah, it's tough. But I think we generally agree. I think, I maybe just am a little more concerned about the fit and the idea that you're going to take Trae Young, who's one of 4 or 5 guys that is just an offense unto himself, and you're going to make him do something like a little bit different, and you don't know if it's going to work. So that's the only difference, I think.
Yeah, I'm lowering mine to a B minus. You talk me into a B minus there. Just that there's that risk in the opportunity cost you gave up. But the flip side of that also is too, you gave up none of your core to get Dejounte Murray, who is a top 35, 40. Like, he's definitely a top 50 guy at this point, right? He was an all-star injury replacement. So to have that and John Collins and Capella and Onyeka Okongwu and Jalen Johnson, like, that's still in your chamber. Plus does that Kings pick ever convey? That's a fair question, but you have a Kings pick. That's something you could dangle in trade packages too. Yeah. So B minus is across the board. You sold me. I'm there.